How cheesy was that for an intro, guys? I do my best to be as cheesy as possible. So welcome to the awesome, cool, pass the exam, cram session thingy with your host, Mr. Hughes. So I'm going to get started really in about 5 minutes, guys, and allow some people to hook up with us here as they get ready. But I'd like to direct you to a couple resources because you can always pause me. How about that? Like that. And then come back and hit play, and I'll move around the screen and teach you stuff. If you want to take a 5-minute break to go potty or to watch a video that we have in the arsenal, and that's the first thing that I'm going to say is I try to share my screen here with you, and sometimes I'm better than other times at doing this. But that's the page that I want to show you, and hopefully you are still hearing me right now. But basically what you're looking at is right on HipHughes.com. It's the US History and Government Review. And what I've done is we have about 300 US history videos. You can certainly go to youtube.com, HipHughes, and check out all of the videos. But I tried to chop it up in terms of how this Regents exam is working. And tonight we're going to try and cover as many topics as possible. Now, if you're not hearing me right now, or you're trying to get across something to me, you can just go and tweet me at HipHughes at Twitter. Course, follow for awesome results. But I'm assuming you guys can hear me right now. So we have colonial. We're going to do some revolutionary stuff. A lot of Constitution, a lot of the exam, about 25% of the exam is going to deal with all of these, concepts about power and checks and how the Constitution works, the Bill of Rights and amendments, and we'll certainly touch base in the next couple hours on that stuff. We have an early federal government section, and I've whittled it down to the big topics. The nudity one seems to get the most views. It's kind of creepy. But you can see, I'm not going to go through all of this now, but you have that option right on hiphughes.com. We also have one more page. If you go to Twitter, you will find this page, which is 114 things that you need to know or you're probably going to fail your exam. And that's right here. I can see a number of you have already found this. But this is Don't Suck. How about that? You guys hear me? No one's saying you can't hear me, so I'm going to keep going. But this goes, chronologically through the exam with links to videos and Regents questions and yada, yada, yada. But certainly you can do that. And I'm hoping that everybody saw that and heard me. And tweet me if not. But I'm just going to get started because what am I going to do? It's a one-man show tonight. We're going to hopefully help you with concepts and remembering things and certainly thematics and DBQs and getting to all of that good stuff as the night progresses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by really kind of covering the exam chronologically. And then as we go on into the evening, if we start losing track, we can jump around as you ask questions and such like that. But really, the first concept that you want to get across is really the idea of colonial representation. Like if you want to say something a million times, I'm just going to put an R on the wall, and that's representation. Because much of this exam and the concepts that are built in to this relationship in colonialism, remember, it's a relationship. Colonialism is like an arranged marriage, right? We are the bride. We've been forced to marry at a very young, creepy age. The father figure in this relationship, which of course is Parliament, Great Britain, the King, whatever you want to call it. So as we talk about some of the vocab words that are involved with colonialism, I'll do that. That's representation. Because at the end of the day, if you can't represent yourself, if you don't have a voice in your government, you are, in a sense, a slave. So some of the earliest concepts, and these words are on the exam, when they're on the exam, I'll like do that or something, so you know I'm serious. But the two words, you're ready, I'm going to do it, are the Mayflower Compact and the House of Burgesses. Those two terms, and I'm not going to go through definitions because that's stupid at this point. We're just going over what's the answer, what's the big idea. And in both of these early colonial experiences, the Mayflower Compact is this piece of paper they signed on the Mayflower, the Pilgrims with the funny hats. And the House of Burgesses is really just an old representational body that the colonists were able to put together and the king sort of allowed so they could manage some of their internal homeland dealings with. In a sense, the wife wants to be able to rearrange the panty drawer. And the father or the husband's like, sure, I'll let you do that. But in both of these examples, the Mayflower Compact and the House of Burgesses, I feel ridiculous. Boom, representation, that's the answer. Because in both of those examples, the colonial people, at least the white men, were able to represent themselves. And that felt good, man. That felt good. That felt so good. It felt good because we were free in a sense. So many times on the Regents, what they do is they ask you the significance of these two vocabulary words. And it's not about the time, the date, and the place. It's about this idea that we had a little bit of freedom. We're able to stretch our wings. We went out partying with the boys. And now when we come back into that abusive relationship that becomes the defining factor in this relationship, we're going to have that in the back of our minds. So they're like long-term causes of the Revolutionary War. But as we jump ahead, remember, we're talking about early 1600s, something like that. And we're going up into the 1770s as this relationship begins to crumble. Just remember conceptually, it's a relationship. The relationship is breaking down. It's not going to work out. And the biggest idea is as we grow, let's go with the analogy. As we get older, as we get wiser, as we get more experience, we start to want to really stand on our own feet. What's in it for us in this abusive relationship, right? One of the concepts on the exam is triangular trade. I can draw a triangle. I certainly hope that people are watching and listening. I'm going to check my Twitter on the stupid computer. I see that there's 10 notifications here. Wow, thanks for that video. Yo, Carolina, Jillian's in the house. Yeah, so it looks like everybody is watching. If not, if you don't hear me, tweet me, but you couldn't hear that. So nevertheless, triangular trade. And if you look at the video review page, it's a little creepy. There's like a outline of a sexy woman because I use this kind of prostitution analogy. And it defines this relationship that we're also looking for. You said it, didn't you? You said representation. Glory be, right? But this idea, that's not a great triangle. I would do it like this. You want to see the worst map in the world, kids? That's Europe right there. Italy, right? And this would be, say North America, America. And this is Africa. The worst map ever. Look at the worst map ever. But this is triangular trade. The idea is that we have some fine womanly stuff in North America. We have like cotton, tobacco, and yum. And the idea is this abusive husband, in a sense, is like pimping us out. He is taking slave labor from Africa. They are coming and taking these raw materials that the colonists are becoming, believing in. These are our materials. It's my cotton. It's my tobacco. But the king's like, you're going to send it to Europe. You're going to send it to the man. And he manufactures it. He turned that cotton, which is worthless in your pocket, into some beautiful, fine fabric that will be selling in the store for $19.99. And this triangular trade is representational of this abusive relationship, that we don't control our own destiny. Forget about African-American slaves. That's a whole different story. You want to talk about lost liberty. These guys are complaining about lost money. People from Africa are coming over the Middle Passage and, of course, being enslaved by the millions. But we're going to leave that alone. Those three concepts, though, and no taxation without representation. Remember, the colonists, and I think this is true for everybody, it's not that we're all against the idea that the government represents us, so they tax us to create things that we need, like defense and roads and bridges. That's taxation without representation. Because if you're piss-potting my money away, if you're buying toys for yourself and fancy cars, then I can say, well, I'm not going to elect you anymore. Right? It's called consent of the governed. This is John Locke, right? John Locke, look what I just did. John Locke, natural rights. This idea that you are born free and you create the government. I used to do a chicken and an egg analogy. What came first, the chicken or the egg, kids? I can't whistle. What? I don't know which came first. That's ridiculous. But the idea is that really the chicken, the people come first. We lay the egg of government, right? And in order to, how can I say this delicately? In order for a chicken to become pregnant with that egg, it needs to be in a familiar way with roosters. Is that the correct way to say this online with kids, right? But here comes the word. Are you ready? She needs to give her consent. She needs to find a rooster she likes to, pick, and they need together to make that government. That's consent of the governed. So what John Locke basically said was that, government comes from the people. You're born with natural rights. If the government takes that right away, and this is Jeffersonian stuff, and now we're getting into big vocab. You ready for this? If this is a bad relationship, right? What do you do in a bad relationship if you're married and you want to get out of the kids? What do you do, right? You get divorced. So in order to get divorced, we have to notify that significant other. So in order to notify Great Britain, we don't love you anymore. We're not digging you. We want our own representation. See that word right there up on the wall, right? We want to tax ourselves for our own benefits. You tax us and you build bridges in London. What the hell is that all about, right? We want to represent ourselves. We're adults now. We can do this. And Jefferson says in the Declaration of Independence, that's the Dear John, dump your ass, I don't love you anymore letter. That's the letter the colonists are writing to Great Britain, and they're saying, look, there's lots of reasons, but basically you're violating our natural rights. You're not giving us self-government. We have a right to leave you. If we can't pick our leaders, we can overthrow the government that is superficially on top of us and pick our own darn leaders. And there was even a guy who wrote a book about it. You want to know what it is? It means it's on the exam. It's called Common Sense, right? This is Thomas Paine, who wrote, you have to be an idiot to stay in this relationship. Duh. I call it the book of duh. Because he's writing to his fellow colonial people, and he's saying, you guys, we need to leave. It's not right that this island nation in Europe controls, millions of people across the ocean for their own benefit. So we have a right to stand up and defend ourselves and pick a government of our own choosing. So, of course, when Great Britain got that letter, they picked that bad boy up. They were like, oh, no. That's not going to happen. This is a Catholic marriage. You are married to us forever. In a sense, it's almost like they see it as a civil war, like they're Abraham Lincoln trying to save the Union, and we're trying to peel ourselves away and create a new country. But in our view, that was common sense. That was the right thing to do. So we're going to skip ahead because the Declaration of Independence leads, of course, to the Revolutionary War. But there's not a lot of battle questions. You're not going to get asked that. Generally, the idea is we should have got our butts whooped, but we had a home field advantage. So we were able to really stretch out the war where it was too costly for Great Britain to keep sending soldiers over. And we had some great victories at the end, and hip, hip, hurrah, we won. I need a drink of water. I'm back. So what's important in that era? And as I talk, I'm going to check the Twitters and see if anyone's watching. There's some notifications in there. How about that? Any essay predictions? We'll get to that, but I would start by saying you really better have at least 2 Supreme Court cases. You never know when they're going to come up. We're going to go over Supreme Court cases, but I'll go over 4 or 5 general thematic essay ideas, and we'll give you a thesis. Like, you can't be writing all about something without a big umbrella over your head. So we'll talk about thesis. Kimmy XO, Brian Baker, Breyer Baker. I was in his room. What a great teacher he is. That was awesome at performing arts. Shout out to performing arts. Your hair is on fleek. Man, I must not be hip anymore because I have no idea what that means. But I was actually in a car accident on Sunday, so I don't have full mobility in my neck. But we're going to do this anyway. But I can do this comfortably. So what was I talking about? I'm not Canadian, by the way. I don't know where that about comes from. But you know what you guys should do? Tweet the link out on the Twitters and on the Facebooks and on the Instagrams and on the Snapchats and all that, because I'm a little bit busy teaching here. But if you could save some other kids, every kid you save, you get like a karmic pin that you can use anytime in life. So go do that right now. That's probably pretty nice of you to do. I'm not looking at the YouTube feed. So if you're waiting for me to respond on that, the only way is if you go to Twitter and you follow me and you tweet something that I'll probably look at it tonight and answer it online. You don't even have to follow me. That's just something people say. What am I going to do? All right, Articles of Confederation. Holy hell. Yeah, you ready? AOC, I call it the AOC. It's the Articles of Confederation. So I always ask at the beginning of the year, hey kids, how many constitutions have we had? And they all go, one. Of course, we've only had one. Wrong, you're wrong. I say you are wrong, wrong, wrong. We had 2 constitutions. And this is critically important to not only understanding that piece of history and its success and its failures, but really the whole idea of government. So the way that I always say it is, and please don't take this too politically, it's not an ideological thing, it's just a way to get kids to remember the main idea, that the Articles of Confederation sucked because the feds were too weak. So I'm going to start this by teaching you federalism. And because if you don't know federalism, you better stay home, son. I'm going to even write it on the board. You'd think I have something to wipe the board off with, but you'd be wrong. I have this. It's someone's shirt. Oh, that kind of hurts my neck a little bit. So I'm going to write this bad boy on the wall because I promise you, if it's not a direct question, it will be on the exam as an idea. All right, federalism. And you already know what the word's about. Representation. So the way that I've always taught this is I've always said that, in a sense, if you go back to that abusive relationship, all right? I used to use Tina Turner and Ike Turner, and then kids were like, who is that? Then I was using Chris Brandon and Rihanna, and then kids were like, who is that? So pick whatever abusive relationship you want. And unfortunately, the woman is the abused person in this relationship, and that is us. We are the colonial power. We are the Tina Turner, the Rihanna, the one at the end of the punch-in, that's going on here. So the idea is that the king, and I don't know how to be a king. If I had a crown, I'd put a crown on, and then I'd be like, I have all the power. This is power. And this is what government is, right? In a sense, government is power. So Great Britain had all the power. Sometimes they'd let us touch the paper, though. They'd go, hey, House of Burgesses, Mayflower Compact. Okay, don't touch it anymore. And the Revolutionary War is this tug of war between the colonists and the king over power. And eventually, we win. We have the piece of paper. So federalism is this idea that never again are we going to allow just one organization to hold the power. That's how tyranny grows. When there's no checks and balances, when there's no division of power, when you give up all your power. So the whole idea of federalism is that we're not just going to have one government, that's too big of an idea. That in a sense, people need to be locally represented. And the idea is that from now on, federalism is the division of power between the federal government, the United States federal government, right? President Obama, the congressional-led, Republican-led Congress, the Supreme Court, right? The Army, the military, this is all federal government. But they're not going to get all the power. We're going to reserve power. We're going to keep power for the states, right? If this was another analogy in a sense, and don't get all political, all right? But if the federal government was the parent in this relationship, the children as young adults still have power. They still have the ability to decide, I don't know what they want to put up in their bedroom walls or who they want to hang out with. But certainly they're living under the house of the federal government. So I'll keep going back to that. And if I said, what is the US Constitution? I would say that it's divided like that, right? We have probably bigger. The federal government is probably like this today because it has I went for a short ride. I had to time warp myself out. But I'm back. Most of you stayed. We're going to keep going. So, Articles of Confederation. I'm talking about this idea that as we get out of this bad relationship, we need to form a government. So what kind of government are we going to form? In a sense, if you're going to get married again and you're picking this new husband and it says, would you like the husband to be strong or be weak? Which one do you pick coming out of that relationship? And what Tina Turner, or the abused woman, says is, I want a weak man. I want most of the power from me. So in the Articles of Confederation, federalism is the division between the federal government and the states. That's the idea. So many times they're going to ask you to categorize or to summarize or to adjectivize. Is that a word, adjectivize? I make words up online. the Articles of Confederation. And I want you to think of weakness, right? If Great Britain was the abusive, evil person that controlled everything that they could, this new husband, the Articles of Confederation, is in a sense a freeloader. He doesn't have any power. He sits on the couch, he watches TV, he doesn't have a job, he has no say in anything that you do, but he's the federal government. So we always say that there's certain successes under the Articles of Confederation. It's a 10-year span, about 1776 to 1786, that it ran the country. It certainly ran us through the Revolutionary War. Good for it, yeah. That's on the test sometimes. I've seen that weird question pop up, one of the successes of the Articles of Confederation. And the other one is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So that's on the test more frequently than I would think it would be. But I call it the mama on and got pregnant law. And the idea is that early on we realized that this country's going to grow, that it's going to expand. So what the Northwest Ordinance basically does is it comes up with a way for us to have more children. Mama got pregnant. It's a process by which territories will be able to join into this family. So the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, the Revolutionary War, but that's it. Now we're going to talk about all the bad stuff. I used to say it was the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good is what I've just told you. The bad is, holy hell, it has no power. Maybe they meant well. Maybe they figured liberty is best kept at home, which it probably is. But they didn't give the federal government the power to tax. So the federal government can't raise any money. They don't give the federal government a leader. Like the aliens come down in 1780 and they go, take me to your leader. You know what you say? We don't really have a leader. Guess it's the Speaker of Congress or the Leader of Congress. Maybe that's who it is. But there's no president. We didn't want someone with power. There's no judicial system. It's just basically 13 guys that show up and represent their hood. They represent their states. It's still federalism. You still have a Congress. You still have some kind of power structure. But it's incredibly inflexible. They needed 9 out of 13 states to agree to any federal law. They needed all 13 to agree to amend that Articles of Confederation. That's why it doesn't exist anymore. So when you pick it up and you go, this isn't a good idea. We shouldn't do that. We should do that. All you need is like Rhode Island to be like, nah, I don't think you suck. And then it's over. You can't change it. So eventually what's going to happen is at a certain point, we're going to realize that the only way out of this thing is to get rid of that thing. And what occurs then, and I'm skipping stuff about the Articles of Confederation. You can watch the video. There's numerous other characteristics of it that make it weak. But at the end of the day, one of them was that you couldn't really have a standing army. You really needed to go to the states if there was a military conflict and ask the kids to come defend the family together. So that's going to be kind of the detail that creates its undoing at the end of the day. And you're right, I keep doing this. I'll probably do this 50 times, one for each question. Shays Rebellion. Shays Rebellion, which occurs, man, I suck at years sometimes. I guess 1781, maybe? I don't know. But basically what happened in Shays Rebellion is there was numerous people that were upset that the government of a state, it was Connecticut, Massachusetts, It doesn't matter. But the government was being unfair, the state government. So with the words of Thomas Jefferson ringing around in Daniel Shay's head, natural rights. If you don't have consent to the government, if the government's not listening, you have the right to overthrow it. Sometimes you hear this nowadays, right? The government's not doing its job. We don't feel like we have any power. We have a right to defend ourselves, or in some cases, overthrow it. Jefferson said that, basically the tree of liberty should be replenished with the blood of patriots and tyrants every 14 years, something like that. He thought revolution was a good thing. Daniel Shay thought it was a good thing. So when they go marching to the Capitol with their pitchforks, it's that state government that's shaking in their boots. And they're basically going to get on the phone and they're going to call 1-800-Congress, Articles of Confederation Congress. And they're going to be like, dudes with pitchforks coming to kill us. Send help. Help's not coming. What's Virginia going to do? What are they going to do? I think Virginia might have sent a couple troops, actually. But all the other states were like, your problem, you're bad, not mine. So that was an illustration, at least to the elite, to the property owners, to the people that wanted things secure, and the central government have a role in doing that. Manufacturers too defend their products. They are going to gather in Philadelphia of 1787. They're going to throw out the Articles of Confederation, and they're going to write a new document called the U.S. Constitution. So welcome to the Constitution. I'm going to remind you that if you go to that page I showed you, and I'm going to try and screen share really quick. There we go. Look at that. What we would like you guys to really probably do by the end of the evening, I'm going to get that page up there. There you go. Is to go into that constitutional area, which is going to be right in here, and certainly get some of the bigger ones under control, like the compromise, the Great Compromise. That's on the exam many, many times. 3/5 is on there a lot. And certainly, jump around here and see what you can do. But what I will say is definitely don't spend a million years in there. You got to get some sleep tonight. Go to bed, at a rational hour so your brain has some fuel. I refuse to get new agey on you. What we are going to do at this point is talk about the Articles of Confederation. I'm going to jump into Twitter really quick. This is like my transitional time. Can you talk about important Supreme Court cases, asks John. Yeah, definitely. We're going to get to it. Trust me. Are you okay? Not really. Is anybody really okay? I'm okay sometimes, Virsha. It stopped. I know I came back. You cut out, dude. You cut it out. Cut it out. Cut it out, Katie. What are you talking about? How long do you think this is going to be? I'm planning to 10 o'clock. So how about that? You got a good answer there, right? Presidents' decisions and reform movements. Yeah, we're going to get to that definitely. Hashtag McKinley. We're probably going to talk about 4 presidents. I usually like to do 2 presidents that expanded the government and 2 that limited the government. And we'll certainly do reform movements because that's a good thematic essay topic. Good, you're a lifesaver. I don't know about that. You're saving your own life. That's what you're doing. The different kinds of colonies, it's not in the exam that much. I mean, if you want to say anything, I would say the northern colonies, manufacturing-based, water-based. They have natural harbors up there. That's a geography question sometimes. But certainly the idea that they have natural bays for manufacturing, they don't need slaves as much. It's one of the reasons they probably don't have slaves. And of course, the South is agriculturally based. So you have a slave economy. And it's probably all you really need to know unless you're taking a push. Checks and balances we're going to get to, certainly. The Scholars Academy, I don't know what that is. This kid's got to graduate. Loaf, Deja, Montana. You're going to do it, kid. You're going to do it. All right. All right, so let's get back to it. I'm going to get a sip of water really quick. But what I'd like you guys to do is go to Twitter, get your friends to come do this. Go tell somebody. Go onto the Snapchat. I don't know what the hell that is. I tried, but I think I have too many, Twitter. I can't do it. I'm getting a little bit old. Sometimes I think it's a little bit creepy, to be honest with you. But we're going to get to it in a second. This is my break time. Look at it more. Where's the longer meditation video? I think the meditation video, Noah, is on the HipHughes.com review link there. It's on the bottom. You can actually Google HipHughes meditation and the stupid thing will come up. And I promise you it works, but it's definitely creepy. I'm in my pajamas at one point. I don't know what I was thinking. Prediction for thematic essay. I don't know. Supreme Court's always a good idea. It's always a good idea to have some kind of idea about federalism, whether that's Manifest Destiny and how federalism is affected, or how federalism is affected the sectionalism of the Civil War. You can do federalism with civil rights, because you have states' rights saying segregation and the federal government, doing the civil rights things. You can't call 1-800-CONGRESS, you ding dong. Jennifer Stone's funny. All right, we're going to do this, kids. Live stream. 2 hours, Joyce, 2 hours. Difference between World War I and World War II. One of them starts as a 1 at the end, and one has a 2. All right, we will get to the wars. There's not a lot of questions about battles and stuff, but certainly the effects of the war, how we got dragged into war, that's going to be really, really important. All right, here we go. Am I an actual teacher? Yeah, I taught 17 years at McKinley High School, US History. I do tech stuff now, because I hate ed reform and they suck the creativity out of my profession because they're little data crazy people. Yeah. All right, that felt good to say. Thanks for letting me do that. That felt really good. All right, so let's do Constitution. I'm ready. So what I would start with is that really most of this is over the whole concept of federalism and the magic word representation, right? And let's just go straight into it. There are 3 compromises that you need to be aware of, all right? And certainly you need to really understand, I can't do this tonight, like executive power, how the president, I'll teach you a trick, right? The president, use your finger. What powers does the president have, right? The president is, Commander-in-Chief. The president can sign treaties. The president can appoint Supreme Court justices. So, that one kind of idea, the president, I can't do this. I am going to talk about the compromises. Let's go to Philadelphia. It's 1787. We're in a big, hot, sweaty room with Benjamin Franklin, who stinks. And we have to figure this thing out. How are we going to write this thing anew? Because actually, they wanted to amend the Articles of Confederation, but there were certain states that just wouldn't do it. Rhode Island, you punk. They're like, no, we ain't going to do it. So at the end of the day, we just have to start with a blank piece of paper. So in the Constitution, and certainly the Federalist Papers, you should know, is really the book game plan of why the Constitution is the way it is. They don't really ask what's in the Federalist Papers. They ask, what were they? And in a sense, they were written by people that believe there should be a stronger federal government. We'll talk about that compromise as we get to the end of this. But really, there are 3 compromises. The Great Compromise, the 3/5 Compromise, and then there's the Bill of Rights Compromise. So the whole idea of the first compromise, the Great Compromise, sometimes it's called the Connecticut Compromise because Connecticut's the state that brokered the deal. But basically what you have is you have very large states in the Union. Think of this as a family that's coming together to figure out how they're going to operate. So Virginia comes in the room and they're like, I got a great idea. I don't know why you have an Italian accent when you live in Virginia, but let's just pretend you do. So I have a great idea. I think that we should do, how you say, representation on population. It's a great idea. The more people you have, the more representation you should get in this family. It only makes sense. So of course, if you figure it out, Virginia has a lot of people. There's a lot of population. So if we base it solely on population, Virginia's going to have enormous power in this new government. There's no doubt about it. The government's going to be bigger than the Articles of Confederation. So the states are worrying about what happens to their states in this new government. So in comes New Jersey. Hey, what's up? I'm from New Jersey. That was a terrible accent. I'll never do that again, I promise. And New Jersey says, forget about what Virginia says. I got a great idea. It's awesome. We should all get equal representation because we're all people in this family. It's not my problem. He's got more kids. We should all be equal. Equality for all. So at the end of the day, we have to figure out how to make both of these people come together and join this new, government, this new country. So at the end of the day, the compromise, the great compromise is we'll have 2 houses of Congress, 2 places where the states in this relationship can be represented. So both the large states and the small states can have a voice. And of course, that is our US Congress, right? We have a Senate. You know how many senators there are? I should make you tweet it out. I'm going to wait like 30 seconds until somebody tweets me how many stupid US senators there are. How many US senators? How many US senators? How many US senators? Come on, tweet me right now. How many US senators? How many US senators? How many US senators? They're not doing it. I'm really serious. I'm going to wait 10 more seconds. Whoever gets it wins a karmic prize. You're going to win a purple pony. Oh, and Carolina, a lot. It says 100. You have a purple pony coming in the air. It might not get there. There's 100 because each state gets 2. It doesn't matter how many population you have, right? And this to some people is very unfair, right? You take a state like Wyoming. They have like 97,000 people. I lie. It's probably more. California, it's got like 50 trillion people. I'm overestimating. So they both get 2 US senators in the Senate, which with the House of Representation writes bills together. So that gives small states the ability to go into this relationship and say, my voice is going to be heard. My people are going to count. We're not going to get blasted out by these states with large populations. That's what the House of Representation is for. So in the House of Representation, it's based on population. It's based on population. You get that, kids? Representation is based on population. So if you want another vocabulary word, I would write down, it's the tiniest piece of chalk ever. The census, right? You know the census. You see the vocabulary word, you're like, oh, it's where you count people. Why? So we know how many people live in your stupid state, so we can figure out how much representation you get in the House of Representation, you ding dong. That is the great compromise. And, you know, if we talk really quick about what is the differences between the House of Representation and the differences between the Senate, I used to say that the House of Representation was like a mad dog. That this was the house that had some special powers that were like a dog's powers. Like they have teeth, sharp teeth. And that teeth always represented in my classroom the power to tax. Congress can tax you. They can take your money away. They can. You go work, they can give them all the money. So they have that sharp teeth. They have to start revenue bills. Now, the Senate would have to pass the same bill, but that starts in the House. And House members are elected every 2 years. Why? Because they have enormous power. They can tax you, right? So if we think of the people and consent of the governed, the idea is that people hold the leash. This is direct democracy. We elect those House members. So if they use the teeth and they bite my wallet, I can yank them out of office. That's consent of the governed. And this idea it kind of drives the idea of the people's house. While the Senate is much more deliberative. What does the Senate do differently? Well, the Senate, holds impeachment trials. The House can bite the president. The dog can bite the president and go, I think you're a bad president. But that doesn't mean the president leaves. He goes to the Senate, the big boys club and girls, where they stand and they go, all right, let's see if this is an impeachable offense, right? And you need 2/3 majority in the Senate to find a president guilty. That's checks and balances. That's a check on the House. So if the House is all hot-headed and they impeach the president for something maybe that's stupid or he didn't do or she didn't do, the Senate can say, whoa, you be cray-cray. Let's slow this ship down. That occurred when Andrew Johnson was impeached, right? So the Senate, what do? They check the president. The president signs a treaty. The Senate's going to check it out. The president appoints a Supreme Court justice. The Senate's going to check it out. But I get off base a little bit sometimes, a tangent. Let's go back to the compromises. The Great Compromise is all about what magic word? What's the magic word? It's representation. And remember, it's between small states, right? I'm equal. And large states. Look at all my peeps, population. And we get that Great Compromise. Now, moving on, the next compromise is going to be the 3. I threw my chalk away. I got pink chalk. Yeah, the pink chalk doesn't really make me feel uncomfortable at all because I'm comfortable in my own, Okay, so we'll do the 3/5 compromise. All right, that's on the exam more than you would think for being, you know, this little piece of the Constitution. But it's pretty disgusting when you think about it. So this is a new battle, not between large states and small states. This is the battle between the southern states and the northern states, because we just talked about the census, right? This becomes critically important about power. The more people you have, the more representation you get in Congress, the more your state has a voice in that chamber. So when the census people come and they come to the South, what are they going to do when they get to slaves? Remember, we have, you know, millions of people that are living in bondage in the southern states. They have no voice. They have no representation. This lecture doesn't mean anything to them. All of my talk about natural rights and John Locke and revolution didn't do anything for them. They're still in chains and bounded. So this is where, for the first time ever, and I'm going to do kind of a horrific Southern accent that's not meant to demean all Southern people. Let's not get too PC here. I'm just joking. But the idea is that I'm going to make sure I count my slaves. You count every single one of my slaves. Count all of them. Now, why does the South think that these slaves are suddenly people that should be counted? Because the more, you know what that means? It means, right, the more population, the more heads counted, the more representation you're going to get in this new chamber. And of course, the North is going, whoa, what? No, that is the stupidest idea ever. Zero, zero. They shouldn't be counted at all. Not because they have big hearts and they're all abolitionists, because they don't want to see a Congress dominated by Southern slave power. But at the end of the day, that's the stupid fraction, guys. I'm sorry. 3/5. For every 5 slaves, the census would count 3 individuals towards your population, which is going to give them more representation. And to be honest with you, that ends up affecting the Electoral College. Can we show you something really quick? Look at an Electoral College map. Let's do Electoral College because we're doing the stupid Constitution anyway. What am I doing? I'm IT. I should be able to do this. All right, so let's jump into, I think that we're sharing the review page here. So let's jump into that really quick and open up an Electoral College map. Let's do 1800. Spelling doesn't count anymore. Don't tell your teachers I said that. All right, so here's an Electoral College map. How we pick the president, right? So the whole idea is that when you run for president, it's not based on popular vote. Like, you can get more votes in total of the other guy or woman and still lose the election. It's happened 4 times. Oh my God. 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, right? But in both cases, I mean, this is what occurs. You have independent battles for the presidency in each state. So, for instance, in New York, when you win a majority of the vote in New York, you win 12 points. And that number 12 is based on your House of Representation and your Senate put together. So if you find a state with a very small population, like Tennessee, right? There's only like a few banjo people out in Tennessee in 1800. No one lives out there except for Native Americans, and they don't count. I don't mean this in a mean way. I'm just trying to teach you things. But because they don't have a lot of people, they only have one House of Representation member. Only one person represents the great state of Tennessee, but they get 2 senators, right? So you get 3. That's the lowest number you can get in the Electoral College. But New York is 12. Now, here's where I come to the 3/5 compromise. And at the end of the day, you have to win a majority of those electoral votes. So that's why you see that map split between green and red. But you need 270 today electoral votes to win. So we'll talk about that maybe later, but that's the Electoral College. But the answer on the exam is usually you can win more votes than the other guy, but it doesn't matter. Like, in fact, if we do this really quick, we do like election of 2000 map. There should be one with a popular vote on here as well. Yeah, so if you look at that, you can see that, you know, the victory is to Bush, but if you look at the popular vote, Gore had 48.4, or you can see right here, it's 500,000 votes more. But at the end of the day, and that's on the exam sometimes, that you could have more votes, but you could lose. But at the end of the day, what I really wanted to point out was South Carolina doesn't deserve 8. They don't. They don't deserve 8. You want to know why they don't deserve 8? Because they're counting 3/5 of their slaves, and those slaves can't vote. So, in fact, this 3/5 compromise is going to affect electoral results sometimes. Southern states are going to get more Southern presidents because of that rule. But that's North and South. Let's do one more compromise, and then we'll get into the Bill of Rights amendments and get into history and lots of other stuff. So, the last deal, the last compromise, is when the Constitution is already done and written. Now, in order to get it ratified, you have to send it out to the 13 states, and 9 of them have to ratify them in their legislatures. So, in a sense, the Federalist Papers is like a book about persuading people to be okay with this new Constitution. But at the end of the day, there are some states that are hesitant. New York is hesitant. They're thinking about, do I want to give up this much power? If I give up this much power, I might be defenseless against tyranny. I need some protection. It's almost like we're setting you up in a new marriage and you don't exactly trust who you're marrying yet. So in a sense, you might want a 9mm in your purse. You might want a pepper spray. You might want something to defend you, maybe some brass knuckles, maybe a shield. And this is the last compromise. It's between proponents of the Constitution as it is. They're called Federalists, like Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Not so much James Madison, but definitely Alexander Hamilton, where they're standing in this idea that this is the Constitution, it's going to work. And then you have anti-Feds. You have people like Thomas Jefferson, who they shipped off to France to get him out of there. But he's saying, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't know if this is right to ratify. So the last compromise is a way to get these anti-Feds on board, and it's the Bill of Rights. I used to have a shield. I couldn't find it. But the shield, in a sense, was the Bill of Rights. So if the government passes the law that violates my natural rights, that takes away my freedom of speech or throws me into jail without a reason, I have this theoretical Bill of Rights which I can block. The Bill of Rights protects me, the people, right? The states, in a sense, in this relationship of federalism from the very federal government that I created. So the Bill of Rights, there's 10 amendments. You need to know 7 of them. Why don't we do this? We'll take a little break. I need a drink of water after this. You can tweet questions, take a break, go get whatever you got to do. But let's do this really quick. It's the Bill of Rights hand game. I'm going to teach you 7 of them masterfully fast and stupid. So the whole idea is that there are 10 amendments to the Bill of Rights. So it defends you. You can always do this. This will get the conceptual Regents question answer. 9 out of 10 times they're like, what's the purpose of the Bill of Rights? And you say, the Bill of Rights protects me from the federal government. Right? But there's 10. So it's an easy way to remember that there's 10. So we'll start with 1. So the first one is pretty easy. It's freedom of, well, we'll start with this way. I go, the First Amendment, 1 finger, flash it for the 5 freedoms. There's 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. You ready? Freedom of speech. I had an itch. I'm sorry. Speech, religion, press. I'm writing on a paper. Press. Even better. Press, right? Assembly. You have the right to gather, protest, right? And petition your government for change. You have a right to lobby, to form the NRA or the NAACP, to group together and demand change, or be Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. So First Amendment, 5 freedoms: freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, protest. Second Amendment, you do 2 fingers like that. You have the right to bear arms. And of course, that's controversial whether we can regulate guns or not. But the main concept is you have a right to have a firearm to defend yourself. I went on one of those time-space missions again. I think I was gone for like 14 years, but it feels like 5 seconds. All right, let's just finish the Bill of Rights and we'll look at the Twitter and take a little break. But I'm going to this idea of Fifth Amendment, you're in trouble, you have the right to remain silent. Sixth Amendment is kind of this this trial idea. I do speedy trial by touching my watch, but all of your trial rights, confronting witnesses and that such, are in the Sixth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment I used to think of as like chains. Like you could whoop someone with it or hang them with it. And it represented punishment. And the Eighth Amendment is no cruel or unusual punishment. But the other important one, I'm looking for my chair. I had a chair and it always represented the 10th Amendment because the 10th Amendment is the very definition of the Republic. The Republic, our representational government, the R word, of federalism. Because the 10th Amendment, and there's so many vocabulary words, I kind of want to do this as I teach the whole darn thing. But the idea is, in the 10th Amendment, that all power that's not delegated to the federal government, delegated is a vocabulary word, federal power, declaring war, regulating interstate commerce, creating a Supreme Court. These are delegated powers, powers that are given to the federal government through consent of the governed. But if it's not in the Constitution, it's reserved for the states. So in my mind, that chair represented the last seat at the Bill of Rights table, and I'm reserving it. I'm reserving it for the people. So if there's anything that's not in that Constitution, and this becomes a debate of the ages in the United States, it's supposed to be reserved for the states. But we have a lot of conflictory things that occur. So for instance, if we talk about the 1950s and the Supreme Court saying that it's illegal to segregate in schools, you're not allowed to do that because it violates other parts of the Constitution, like the 14th Amendment and equal treatment of your citizens. That's when the states go, but there's nothing in the Constitution about segregation and who runs the schools. It's reserved for the states. Gay marriage, the same thing. Southern states saying, we decide because it's our state, and the 10th Amendment reserves our power to do that, where the federal government, that other piece of paper, is saying, no, the 14th Amendment says that no state shall deny its citizens equal treatment. So all of these battles, the Civil War, expansion of slavery, segregation, civil rights, gay rights, is really about federalism at the end of the day. So if you can write about that, you'll be a gangster. An academic one, that is. All right, let me get a drink of water. Let's check the Twitters. I've gone for 54 minutes. We're going to go for at least another hour as we dive into like presidents and the Civil War and Supreme Court cases and big ideas about foreign policy, and we'll do the best that we can. I'm going to run to the teacher's room real quick, and then when I come back, we're going to do this. So tweet your questions now. We'll check the Twitter first thing when I come back, and then we'll go and get her done. Would you like to go and get her done? I'd like to go and get her done. Maybe I could show a video. I think there's a way to do that. I could share the screen, but I don't think you hear the sounds. What's all these? I got all these tool box. What does that do? That's a comment tracker. I don't want to watch it. I'm done. I'm going to go take a break. 5 minutes, guys. We come back and we go get her done. All right. Go share it on Facebook. Go do something to help your own self, for goodness sakes. I can play music. I can do that. Yeah, let's play a little. I used to have like history rap, but I don't have that anymore. I can't find the stupid thing. So let's just play something cheesy for you guys. So I got one. You ready for this one? You guys are going to kill me. Here we go. Sorry.
Well,
it's happening.
You sure got to climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long week while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Hey, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will. But today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to record on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm gonna live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over.
Oh my goodness, that was terrible. You guys must be pretty upset with me right there. I'm trying to find the stupid window. It's in here. Hey, there you are, guys. Nice to see you. We're going to take a look at a couple of your tweets and then answer them and then continue with going and skipping across American history now. The perfect thematic essay. I just went through the 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights again. I'll do it really quick. You ready? Okay. First Amendment, 5 freedoms. You got freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, petition. Second Amendment, bang, bang, the right to bear arms. Fourth Amendment, roll your fingers, knock on a door, think of the po-po. It's the search warrant probable cause. We can't go into it, Matt versus Ohio. Fifth Amendment are your rights under arrest, a due process, the right to remain silent. Sixth Amendment are trial rights, like speedy trial, the lawyerly kind of stuff. Eighth Amendment, like 2 chains connected for punishment, no cruel or unusual punishment. The 10th Amendment is going to be that last seat you save in the Bill of Rights. Think it's reserved powers. And that's really important. Federalism is the division of power between the federal government, 10th Amendment, reserved for the states or the people. Now, in terms of thematic essay advice, I'll do that now, because a lot of you are asking, and then I'll hit the Twitter again really quick. There's 3 main pieces of advice. Now, certainly, we'll go over thematic essays. Someone wants Supreme Court, I'll give you the Supreme Court essay. Progressive is a big one. Imperialism or foreign policy. Sometimes it's Cold War. It could be on presidents. It could be on change and reform groups. They like to do civil rights a lot, so we'll hit that. But besides the content, there's things that you can do. First, know how important they are. They're scored from a 1 to 5. So you're going to get a score out of 10. Really, a 6 is the medium, 2 3s, and it's hard to fail when you get 2 3s. Now, if you get 2 3s, you can chop out less than half on the multiple choice sometimes and still pass if you answer all your DBQ questions. But to skip an essay or to write 1 paragraph, you might as well just jump off a bridge or go live in a van down by the river and call it a day. Number 1 is write 4 stupid paragraphs, the best you can, even if you feel stupid. Most times you're gonna get a 2, and that's a 7-6 point differential sometimes. So my first advice is format. Write 4 paragraphs, write that stupid, sandwich. Opening paragraph, copy your tasks and the dots, what you're gonna do. Thematic ideas are great. If you can get an umbrella, like a thesis. One thesis I teach kids is, there's a couple. Change happens, but it happens slowly. That could go in the opening paragraph if it's about change. If it's about the court or civil liberties, it could be during times of crisis. People's rights go down. When 9/11 happens, or World War II happens, or World War I happens, or the Civil War happens, someone's going to lose their rights. Habeas corpus for those Southerners who are fighting the federal government. In World War I, it's going to be socialists and some Reds, some communists. The second war, it's going to be Japanese Americans who are going to be interned in camps. After 9/11, many Arab Americans felt like their rights were being violated. So that's a thesis. That's a big idea. But if you don't know a big idea, just copy the stupid theme and write the stupid dots. right? If it says why a monkey climbs up the tree, you write in this essay, I will be talking about the process by which the monkey climbs up the tree. Pound out 3 stupid sentences, or go live in a van down by the end of the river. Do the same thing for the end. Just summarize, say the stupid thing again. This isn't a brilliant idea, but it's going to get you 2, hopefully. And then, you know, address the stupid dots. Answer every dot. Dots or die, try it. And that'll get you a 2. It'll feel stupid. You'll feel like you want to run away, but you're much more likely to pass. Kids who skip essays fail. Remember that. And like I'll say it again, format, dots or die trying, lay out the dot in a question format if you have to, and then try your best to answer it directly. And certainly you have to know stuff. If you don't know stuff, it's going to be a rough go. But for thematic essays, my biggest advice is don't skip anything. Dots or die trying. For the DBQ, I have a great video. It's called the peanut butter and jelly video. It's on hiphughes.com in that review page. But the idea, the big idea is that peanut butter is the documents. Jelly is what you know outside of the documents. It's a peanut butter and jelly essay. It's not a peanut butter essay. If you write a peanut butter essay, you will get a 2 if it's decent. You will not get a 3. You must increase your score. You must have jelly. I don't care if it's the craziest jelly in the whole wide world. I've seen teachers rationalize people throwing in some weird connection to today. So it's about war, and somebody says, I don't know, in the middle of the essay, Congress is thinking about declaring war on ISIS. That's jelly. We can rationalize 3 and give you a chance. But again, it's going to be dots or die trying, write as much as you can, format counts. All right, that felt good. You can't spend forever on it. We'll look at a couple other notifications here. What do we got? Brian Haran! Banana. That's the shout out. Major argument opposed the ratification of the Constitution. So the major, and this is for Sassy, the major forces or arguments that oppose the ratification of the Constitution are led by the anti-feds. They're going back to that colonial relationship going, you don't remember what happened? You can't give that much power to the federal government. That the federal government will crush your liberty. That Jefferson said power belongs to the people. Consent of the governed. They're called anti-feds because they believe, you know, in the Articles of Confederation in a sense, and limited government. They don't like the idea that the federal government has the power to tax, declare war, have a standing army, you know, enormous power to regulate trade, interstate commerce across state lines. The Alaska Clause, which gives them the power to create all laws that are necessary and proper, you know, using delegated power. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's do a couple of court cases. How about that, right? So, and I cluck like a chicken. Someone asked me that because it's on the test vocabulary word. All right. So the Supreme Court, the major idea is judicial review, right? And the first big court case that you would need to know is called Marbury versus Madison. And I wouldn't write about this court case because you have to first understand that there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the Supreme Court the ability to strike down laws as they review them. It just has them look at them. So one of the first big court cases is going to ask the question itself, does the Supreme Court have the right to declare laws unconstitutional? And they give themselves that power. It's called judicial review. It's part of the unwritten Constitution. It's not actually in the Constitution, but we all accept it as part of the game. That if Congress passes a law that violates your rights, going to take away your freedom, the Supreme review where they actually did that. So there's 3 kinds of court cases, and this would be a great thematic essay. There are court cases that make the federal government stronger, and you unfortunately getting distorted through the YouTubes of like tremendous arms and guns, but the camera does do that. So we'll go through a couple federal government Supreme Court cases that expand the federal government's power. In a sense, the Supreme Court is going to change the division of power in federalism as we do this. So each time The federal government gets a little bit bigger, the state power gets a little bit smaller. So the other court cases are cases that shrink your rights, limit your rights, and then there's court cases that expand your rights. So boom, boom, boom. Every court case you give me goes into one of those three categories. That gives you a thematic idea. The Supreme Court can expand the power of the government. The Supreme Court can limit our rights, usually during times of crisis it occurs, but they can. And they can also expand our rights, like the gay marriage case, right? There's people that say, I couldn't get married before that, now I can, I have more liberty. But there's other court cases where they say, no, you don't get that liberty. We'll do that. Okay. So here are the big three. Marbury versus Madison established judicial review, right? McCulloch versus Maryland. So this is a really quick story. There is a new institution that the Federalists, the first administration wants. It's the Washington administration. Hamilton is the Secretary of Treasury. He's a Federalist. They want a big ass bank. They want a national bank. And it's not in the Constitution. It doesn't say anything about a national bank in the Constitution. So they created it anyway. And then at a certain point, the state of Maryland decides, well, we don't like this national bank, so we, the people of Maryland, are going to tax this bank. We're going to tax it right out of town. And basically what the federal government says is, you don't have a right to tax me. And Maryland says, yeah, I do, and you have a right to create a national bank. So what are you going to do? We're going to go to the Supreme Court. McCulloch, he represents the federal government versus Maryland, McCulloch versus Maryland. And what the court is going to say is that the federal government wins. That number one, you can't tax the supreme being in the relationship. The supremacy clause, the federal government, at the end of the day, if there's a fight, is going to be the winner if it's a constitutional basis. So it's a foundational supremacy clause case, but it's also about the elastic clause. Remember I said, Congress shall make all laws necessary and proper that are attached to their delegated power. So what's delegated power? Well, they have the right to coin money. They have the right to tax. They have the right to regulate currency, right? So to do that, you can make a national bank. So even if it's not in the Constitution, the elastic clause can be used to make this a constitutional entity. So McCulloch versus Maryland, power. And then the last one is Gibbons versus Ogden. And this is a court case about, it's stupid, it's about a river, and there's a boating company that has a state license, and then there's another company, steam company ship, that has a federal license, and they're fighting about who has the right to control these waterways. And what the court says is, at the end of the day, that number one, it's again a conflict between the state and the federal government, so it's supremacy clause, but it's also interstate commerce clause. In the delegated power list in the Constitution, it says that Congress can regulate interstate commerce. So I can't regulate things within your state, it says. So if I sell eggs, to, the Ingalls and Little House on the Prairie, right? The federal government can't regulate that egg business because I'm not sending my eggs across the country. I'm selling my eggs in Walnut Grove. Now, if this selling or commerce or whatever it is crosses state lines, like rivers go across state lines, then the interstate commerce clause gives the federal government the right to license, to regulate, to control it. This is going to be used when we do the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Can we ban, segregation in hotels? And the Supreme Court says, yeah, interstate commerce. The road on the hotel goes between states. We're going to use that. But the idea is all three of these court cases, federal government power. Now, I'm going to only do one. One of these, one of these. I'll say more, but I'll only do one because we don't have enough time. So cases that limit power. There's three that come to mind. One of them is Plessy versus, that's a dog, my dog, whole bunch of dogs. Plessy versus Ferguson. This is a court case where Plessy goes to the Supreme Court and he says, I live in Louisiana. They have a law called the Separate Car Act. They're making me sit on a different train. The 14th Amendment says that we're all equal and all this stuff. What's going on? And the federal government goes, separate can be equal. It doesn't mean that your constitutional rights are being violated. So Plessy rights become shrunk. You have Schenck versus United States. This is a World War I case. It's a great case. Schenck is a socialist, and he's handing out literature on the street saying you shouldn't go to war. If they draft you, don't go, because this is a war for capitalists and you shouldn't go. And the police arrest him, and they say that your speech is endangering the war. So it's his freedom of speech versus the government wanting to shut him down to win the war. Schenck loses, right? His freedom of speech was violated because of a crisis. That limited his freedom of speech. And then there's Korematsu versus United States. This is a little bit inappropriate, and I apologize, but it's the only way I get kids to remember it. Say the name as they would say it in the country of its origin. It's Korematsu versus United States. Korematsu versus United States. Does it sound Japanese? So this is in the news right now. I'll go over the case and make the current day connection. That's some jelly right there. Korematsu is living his life in California, the American dream. He's a Japanese American, but he's an American citizen. He has a store, he sells stuff, he does good in his life. And then one day the government says, you might be a spy, go into the prison camp now. And he's like, what the hell? Habeas corpus. You have to have a reason to arrest me. That's habeas corpus. What's the reason? No reason. You might do something. It's like that futuristic movie where they arrest people before they do the crime, right? So he's saying to the Supreme Court, what's up? You can't do this. Judicial review my ass out of here. And the court says, no, war is big time. You know, we're going to allow FDR to issue this order and lock you up. That limits his rights. And of course, today, there are people that believe that perhaps there are Muslim Americans that might be spies. And maybe that next step for some people is we need to stop them before they hurt us. And that becomes this conflict between the right to live free and the government having a fear of the unknown. Expansive cases. Let's just do two, all right? There's a whole bunch. Most of them come in the Warren Court in the 1960s, where they're going to basically use the 14th Amendment to expand rights. So one of them would be, for instance, Mapp versus Ohio. I love this story. I love it. It's called the Dirty Little Old Lady case. Just think of this the whole time. All right, I'll teach you one court case. But all of them, Miranda versus Arizona, Gideon versus Wainwright, all this stuff is really important. But Mapp is minding her own business, you know, little old lady. She's in Ohio, hanging out in her house, and then and they want to search her house. It's actually connected to Don King. Don't ask me about it now. But basically, she says, I don't want you all up in my house. I don't want you in my house. And supposedly they flash a warrant that was later found out not to be a worthy warrant. And they start looking for the suspect in a crime in Miss Mapp's house. And they don't find him. And I'm imagining they're pretty PO'd. So they start digging through her house. And they end up in her basement. And they're going through boxes and chests. And they find some illegal, illicit pornography in her basement. She's a dirty little old lady. Ew. And she's arrested. And now the Supreme Court is looking at that warrant. They didn't have a warrant, you know. You're supposed to have a warrant based on probable cause, and it's supposed to tell you where to look and what to look for. They didn't have it. So what do? She's guilty, right? So what the court does is they say that from now on, if you don't have a search warrant and you find anything, you can't use it at trial. It's called the exclusionary rule. So Miss Mapp is given a new trial where the evidence can't be used. So what does that do to Miss Mapp's right? To your rights. It expands your rights. So does when we make the police read you your rights, Miranda versus Arizona. Or if you can't afford a lawyer, Gideon versus Wainwright, we'll give you a lawyer, right? These are expansive cases. They expand rights. All right, good for all of us. Let's hop through Washington really quick. I'm going to check the Twitters as I kick it here. Oh my goodness gracious, guys. We're going to all pass. How about that? Mr. Claff, GI Bill, College for Vets. Yeah, go to Mr. Claff if you have time too. He has some awesome review materials. He's given some awesome tweets out as well. You should go check him out really quick. All right, why don't we move on here? I wasn't looking at notifications. Yeah, I've gone over a couple of thematic essays. Supreme Court's one of them. We're going to do 2 foreign policies before the evening is over. We'll go through a couple of different presidential administrations as well. I'm not a goat, dumb kids. All right, here we go. Shout out to Steve Grace. Power to the people. Power to Steve Grace. I still don't know what the thought of the Scholars Academy is. The difference between a Democrat and a Republican. Wow, damn Nash, you got 10 years? The parties have changed a lot. I have an election playlist, but it's hard to describe what those parties represent today and what they represented yesterday because they've changed so much, especially the Democratic Party. I'm not going to do it. I almost launched into a whole Democrat, how the KKK, they were all Democrats, but not today anymore. All right. Habeas corpus and the Monroe Doctrine. Why don't I do Monroe and the Roosevelt Corollary? I'll do that for Antonia, and I'll do that for Breyer, who asked me as well. I was in his class, Mr. Baker, last week. He's an awesome teacher. So first of all, I'll start with this. You could get the foreign policy essay for sure. And I would start with a thesis, right? Big idea, something to write about in the opening paragraph. So what I would start with is that whatever we do it for me. Whatever we do it for us. Whatever we do it in our own self-interest. That's the thesis for foreign policy. So whether we're isolated or at war or containing communism or gobbling up new markets and imperialism, in our mind, we're doing it for our own self-interest. So you always start with that in the opening paragraph, that, you know, America's had many different foreign policies, but all of them defend and try to protect the special interest of the United States. Think of the United States like a person. Whatever you do it for yourself. But in foreign policy, I have a foreign policy dance video. I don't feel like dancing because my neck hurts because I was in a car accident. So you can go watch that video. But basically, we start with isolationism. Washington's farewell address is very important. That's on the test a lot. And I always gave hand signals. I would say no more than 2 terms. Remember, Washington stepped down after 2 terms. I would say, watch out for the 2 political parties. Washington understood that the 2-party system, which is part of the unwritten Constitution, was to develop into a system where they wouldn't be looking out for the interest of the United States, but only the interest of their own political party. Maybe that's happened. But the last thing he does is he shakes his hand at Europe and he says, stay the hell away from Europe. This is isolationism. Washington understood that we couldn't be fighting with Europe, the dogs of war, every 2 years, because we wouldn't be a country. We're the 98-pound weakling in a country of a world of bullies. So stay the hell away. But as we grow, we start to get hungry, especially as a young adolescent, person. So the first thing we do is we shift to the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine is 1823. But basically what it says is, look, we still want to stay the hell away from Europe. We understand that. We can't be dancing in Italy, fighting with Spain. That's all cray-cray. But what we can do is we can take a piss in Latin America. We can do that. I always thought of the Monroe Doctrine as the United States is a dog, and we're peeing all over Latin America. We're going, smell that. Why does a dog pee? To warn other dogs to stay away. So even though we're not battle ready, we're not going to go fight every day here. We are going to say to Europe, it's best you stay on your side of the globe as well, because this is our sphere of influence. We don't want Russia in Argentina. We don't want Great Britain controlling Mexico. So the Monroe Doctrine is that dog pee idea, but we really can't defend it yet. It's not like we can go to war if they want to, War of 1812, but whatever. But at the end of the day, as we grow older, as we start to industrialize, right after the Civil War, we have the Transcontinental Railroad that's built during the Civil War. We have Hughes. We need new markets to sell our goods. We need new raw materials to keep our factories producing. So what Roosevelt says is that the Monroe Doctrine isn't going to be empty words anymore. That from now on, we're going to protect our investment in the sphere. I've always called the Roosevelt corollary Monroe with a gun, right? Roosevelt said, speak softly, but carry a big stick, right? So if there's going to be, Spain and Cuba, and they be messing with us a little bit, we're going to have the Spanish-American War. We're going to kick them out. We're going to say to Spain, you don't belong here anymore. When we have the Soviets in the 1960s, put missiles into Cuba, that violates the Monroe Doctrine. It changes the game. And the Roosevelt corollary would go as far as saying we have a right to use our Navy, to use our forces to make sure that we secure our self-interest. And we intervene in Latin America a lot, a lot of times, usually for pro-business reasons. Chiquita Banana or whatever companies wanted U.S. power, we gave it to them. So that is my spiel on the Roosevelt corollary and Monroe Doctrine. If I was to continue with foreign policy, what I would say is after imperialism, I do this turtle game, right? Because after imperialism, as war breaks out in Europe, people start, kind of, remember what Washington said. Remember what Washington said. Stay the hell away from Europe. It's not in our self-interest. We need to stay on our side of the globe. So we have this turtle game that occurs with World War I and World War II. We started the turtle. As World War I breaks out, and it's bad. It's like really, really bad. Like if you think it's bad, it's a million times badder than you think right now. But at the end of the day, as that war progresses and it starts to affect us, we have the Zimmerman note where Germany's trying to get Mexico to be sneaking up on our behind and attacking us. We have the Lusitania sinking, unrestricted submarine warfare. Russia pulls out of the war. Great Britain is going down. It's going to affect our trade. Now we have to get involved. So the turtle pops out, wins World War I, and then what happens after World War I? What does the turtle do? Does the turtle join the League of Nations? Does the 14 points happen? Is the Treaty of Versailles going to be something that the U.S. is going to sign and we become an international turtle? No, to the no. We go back into the shell, and that's that 1920s period, 1930s period, where we're once again isolating ourselves. And as World War II breaks out, we pass the Neutrality Acts. We're not going to get involved, right? It's not our business. It's not our war to be fought. And then what occurs, right? Slowly, we feel knocks on the door, right? We peek out, the Lend and Lease Act. The turtle throws some stuff to Great Britain. Here, save yourself. But we're going to stay in the shell until Pearl Harbor. And when Pearl Harbor happens, that turtle pops its head out and it's never going back in, right? We're going to win World War II. We're going to drop a bomb on Japan, 2 bombs. We're going to rationalize that by saying it saved American lives. We're going to have D-Day. We're going to win World War II. And then as soon as World War II ends, we go to the containment concept. Containment is this fear that communism is going to spread and we need to contain it. So wherever it spreads, the Berlin airlift, right? The Marshall Plan, we're going to save Europe with money, right? We're going to contain it in Korea. We're going to go to Vietnam. We believe if we don't contain it, like dominoes, it will fall until it falls into the United States. New World Order is after that. We're not going to do that. It's not on the test that often. But that's the spiel on foreign policy. You start with this idea of isolationism, Washington's farewell address, right? You dog pee in Europe in the dance. I lift my leg, my back hurts right now. And then we start to rub my belly. This is imperialism. I'm hungry. I'm hungry for new markets. I'm hungry for raw materials. I'm hungry for naval bases, right? We get the Philippines. How about that, right? And then I do that turtle game. Neutrality, right? World War I, unrestricted submarine warfare. We come out. Treaty of Versailles. We go back in. Pearl Harbor, we come back out, and now we're out forever. We're in the United Nations, we're in NATO, we're in World Treaty Organizations. So for now, that's where we are. So let's go through some big ideas in sectionalism. Let's do the federal government, early federal government first, because that's on the exam a lot. I'm gonna look at the Twitters really quick. We're doing the best we can. This is a one-man show tonight, guys. Thank you, Mr. Jonathan Redeker. He's a great Twitter guy right there. Good for us. Thematic tomorrow on rights and compare the libel case of Zenger with the current events of real Donald Trump. Well, the Zenger, I have a video on the Zenger case, and basically it's the idea that you can publish articles against the government. So that they tried to shut Zenger down because they said that he was being libelous. He was accusing the government of things you're not allowed to do that. And it's a freedom of press case before the government is a government. It's still colonial era, but it kind of carries on that this is the idea of freedom of press. And the current event is just, I think what Mr. Rediker is referring to is that Trump has been revoking the press credentials of some pretty big newspapers like the Washington Post, I believe. So I don't think it's the same exact thing. But certainly he's talked about widening the libel laws to make it easier to sue against media outlets. But that gets into some political stuff that I'd rather not get into. All right, we're doing good, guys. We're going to do some Washington stuff, and then we'll take a little break, and then we'll come back. Can we just focus on content? I'm doing it. I'm really tired, okay? All right, Shada, here we do. Here's some content for you. So when you do early federal government stuff, you always do this concept, because the idea is that it strengthens the federal government. We have the national bank, right? That's created under the first federal government. That's a big deal. It expands the economy. And if I had to pick one more, I'd say Whiskey Rebellion. That hurts my back. When you do Whiskey Rebellion and you make a fist, it's the opposite of Shays. Shays' Rebellion illustrated the weakness of the Articles. When the people rose up in Western Connecticut, Massachusetts, keep forgetting. We didn't have a way to shut them down. So when we passed the first tax in 1790, they passed the first tax. It's on whiskey, numerous reasons. But the people that make whiskey are generally poor. And a lot of them are very rural. People in Western Pennsylvania, for instance. So when the tax collectors would come, they would get tar and feathered. The people would say, we're not going to pay your tax. We're going to kick your ass down the mountain. Go home. And what Washington did was he garnered 13,000 troops and he marched towards this Whiskey Rebellion, and it quickly broke up. He's illustrating the supremacy of the federal government, the power of the federal government. The federal government is supreme. And if you don't like the rules or you don't follow the rules, at the end of the day, we hold most of that military power and you're going to listen. So that's the early federal government stuff. Let's do sectionalism real quick because it's a big concept. Now, of course, you all know manifest destiny, right? Manifest destiny is this idea that we start getting pregnant all the time. Remember the Northwest Ordinance of 1787? Oh, my mom got pregnant. Well, she keeps getting pregnant. We have new states that are entering the Union. 1820 is a key year because that's the year that Missouri enters the Union. And basically what is occurring is we're having a conflict between the southern states and the northern states over power. Now, I wish I could stand here in front of you and tell you that the northern states believed in abolishing slavery, and that was on the top of their agenda list. It wasn't. But for other reasons, they are against the expansion of slavery. Free labor. How are they going to get jobs out west if it's all slaves out west, right? The balance of power on economic issues like tariffs. Southerners don't like tariffs. They don't like taxing imports because they buy the imports. The northern states, they love tariffs because it makes you more likely to buy their goods because they're not taxed. The tariff is. But that tariff question is settled in Congress. So if you bring in 10 new slave states, the family dynamics have changed. Think of it like boys and girls. Like in 1820, I think there were 26 states. So you have 13 girls and 13 boys and mama's pregnant. So really sectionalism as manifest destiny is the expansion westward, and we grow and we get big. We're having this conflict as new kids join the family. What are we going to do? So in 1820, we kind of hatch a deal where we draw a line across the country. It's called the Missouri Compromise. And then we go, well, if mama has a baby up there, it's free. And if mama has a baby down there, it's a slave. Problem solved. And that worked for a little while. And then in 1850, we have a new rash of states coming in. We have California coming in. We have Maine coming in. We have Kansas coming in. We have Nebraska coming in. We have all of these new states. So really sectionalism, which is the root of the Civil War, is really over federalism. States versus federal government. So at a certain point, we tried popular sovereignty in the 1850s. We're going to vote on slavery. We'll just let the settlers decide. If they want slavery, they'll go. If they don't want to go, whatever. At the end of the day, the North wants to stop the expansion of slavery for economic reasons, and the South sees it as a states' right thing. We should be allowed to take our property wherever we go. And of course, there's other stuff in there, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Dred Scott decision, where the Congress steps in 1856 and says, you know what, problem solved, you're a slave everywhere. And what that does is it radicalizes many of those Northerners. You know, I've always said that in explaining the Civil War, that it's almost like the South was confused. The South thought the federal government wanted to abolish slavery because whenever they read the newspapers, they're reading about John Brown, who's trying to start a civil war to free slaves. They're reading about abolitionists. They're seeing this fire of abolitionism that's probably never coming. So they decide at a certain point that enough is enough. That when Abraham Lincoln gets elected in 1860, they feel as though they have a right to rebel against their government because they don't have consent to the government and they think the federal government's going to free all the slaves. So that creates the conditions that create the Civil War, where Lincoln is going to represent the federal government. It's this. Federalism is the division of power between the federal government, Lincoln, and the Union, and the states who have decided, I don't want to be part of this family anymore. I'm going to start my own family. In a sense, Lincoln believes that this is a marriage that can't be broken. That in a sense, you've been adopted into a family. You can't unadopt yourself. Where the South believes this is a marriage. We married you. We don't love you anymore. We think that we should leave. So that's my quick explanation on understanding how sectionalism and the expansion of slavery and the fight about representation in Congress is going to lead to eventually this fracture in the Union, where Lincoln is going to do everything in his power to save the Union, including violating rights. Like we talked about before, Lincoln violated habeas corpus. He'd shut down newspapers of Southern, sympathizers. He'd put people in jail without trials because he believed that the crisis to save the Union gave him that power. So that's really important. So what I would say is after the Civil War, understand Reconstruction. Reconstruction is the bringing back of this marriage or this family. You have people like Lincoln and Andrew Johnson, moderate politicians that believe this should be a quick and easy reconstruction. I've always called it hugs and slugs. Hugs and slugs! Lincoln and Johnson are like, come on, baby, I miss you. This war is over. Just give me a mwah, give me a big hug. Let's make it easy on you. In fact, the Lincoln plan, I believe, only included the 13th Amendment and 10% loyalty oath. Only 1 out of 10 people had to say, my dad. The radical Republicans, the ones that control Congress, though, they believe in slugs. It's called hugs and slugs. Lincoln, hug, radical, slug. They want to punish the South. They want to make sure this never happens again. They want the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment. I call it the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment because they're all Reconstruction amendments. Free slaves, treat them equally as citizens, allow males to vote, black men to vote. So it's free, equal citizens vote, 13, 14, 15. At the end of the day, the biggest idea, though, is that they want military occupation. They don't believe those southern states are going to just be good from now on. They believe they need people there to protect the rights of those African Americans that have been freed. So that becomes Reconstruction, a 10-year period where blacks voted. Blacks were elected to office. There was a black US senator, black congressmen, black governors, because the military oversaw Reconstruction, which ended in 1877 because of an election. So how about that? We've done sectionalism, we've done manifest destiny, we've done a little bit on the Civil War, we've done a little bit on Reconstruction. I'm gonna whip through the amendments that you need to know really quick, take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll hit upon presidents and big ideas. Time warp. I'm back. All right. An amendment is an addition to the Constitution. So you don't want to make it easy to change the rules, right? Imagine if to change the rules, it only took, half of the people to decide. If you wanted to change the rules of the NFL like every year, what a pain in the butt that would be. So the Constitution is a supermajority, and it's actually federalism. To change the Constitution, you need 2/3 of both houses of the federal government and 3/4 of all of the states. It's another great way to use federalism on the exam. The process by which amending the Constitution uses both federal government stuff, 2/3 of both houses, and 3/4 of all the states. You want to know how to remember it? It's so stupid. 2/3 of both houses, 3/4 of all states. 2/3 of both houses, 3/4 of all states. But we've done that 17 times. So we have 27 amendments. Luckily for you, they're not all on the exam. But you're not going to like me, because you could get 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, and 26. So the way to remember them is, first of all, group your Reconstruction amendments together. 3 Reconstruction amendments. You can figure it out, right? Abolishing slavery, free citizens, black male vote. 17. This is so stupid. When you do 17, you just kind of spell it, and then just circle the SE. What starts with SE? It's the Senate, right? So this is DD for the Senate. Direct democracy. The Senate, was never chosen by the people directly. It was one of these ideas in federalism. In a sense, the Senate represented, the state. So the state legislatures voted for their senators. But in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, the Senate became so corrupt that numerous people said, we need to give the people the power to pick their senators. So that's the 17th Amendment. 18 and 21 go together. You just think of drinking ages, right? It used to be 18, you could drink. Today, you have to be 21. It has nothing to do with drinking ages. If you write that, I'm going to kill you. But it should remind you, my back hurts. It should remind you of alcohol. So the 18th Amendment is prohibition, and the 21st Amendment is the repeal of prohibition. So no drinky, 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 drinky. 22, the 22nd Amendment. Just say 2, like a million times. And you remember the 22nd Amendment is no 2 terms for the president. Go back to Washington's farewell address. I already taught you this, kids, right? No more than 2 terms. Washington stepped down after 2 terms. He didn't have to. He could have ran 1,000,000 times if he lived to be 1 billion years old. But at the end of the day, all of the other presidents followed his lead. I've said this before, the unwritten Constitution, right? One of it was judicial review. Another one is the no 2-term rule until FDR. And of course, we all know FDR was elected 4 times. But as soon as he's dead and buried, someone's like, we need to write that beep in the Constitution. So we all gone and done the bump, 2/3 of both houses, 3/4 of all states. And we got the 22nd Amendment. The only other amendment I've ever seen is the 26th Amendment. It's so stupid that I almost think I should be fired for teaching it. But the way I've always remembered it is when I do, oh my back, 26, I do plus, and then I remember 18. It's 18-year-old vote, right? It's during the Vietnam War. How old do you have to be to get drafted? 18. So I'm old enough to get shot in the face, but I can't vote. Are you serious? Really? Okay. So we all gone and done the bump. And we amended the Constitution to lower the voting age to 18. That's the 26th Amendment. So if that helps you, that's great. There's an amendment video. There's a Bill of Rights hand video. That sounds creepy every time I say it. All right, guys, it's 9:40. I'm going a good half hour. I know that. We're going to do the best we can. Let's jump 20th century when I get back. I'd like to talk about change, doing reform and the progressives and the populists, New Deal. I'd love to talk about the different roles of the federal government when it comes to how the economy works. And I'd certainly like to touch upon some civil rights stuff as well. So tweet stuff now. When I come back, we'll go through the Twitters really quick. I'm going to take like a 5-minute break because I feel really not well. And I'm going to make you listen to this terrible song. We'll be right back, guys.
50 nifty United States from 13 original colonies. 50 nifty stars in the flag that billows so beautifully in the breeze. Each individual state contributes a quality that is great. Each individual state deserves a bounty, so let them know. 50 nifty United States from 13 original colonies. Shout 'em, scout 'em, tell all about 'em. One by one till we've given a day to every state in the USA. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming, North, South, East, West, and objective opinion. It's the best of the nifty United States from 13.
I think I'm going to get sued for doing that. All right, so we're going to look at a couple of tweets really quick. Thanks for the well wishes. I was in a little car accident, but we're not going to talk about that. It wasn't my fault. Go to a chiropractor. I actually did today, believe it or not. I can't see you. I can't see you either, Lauren B. What's McCarthyism? McCarthyism is, there's two Red Scares. You know, red is the color of communism. So you have Red Scare 1 right after World War I and Red Scare 2 right after World War II. They focus generally on World War II and what happens after that. Number one, we get something called HUAC, the House on Un-American Activities Committee, which Newt Gingrich said that we need to revive today in order to root out, you know, Muslims that are against us in the United States that are Americans, I guess. But McCarthy was a senator from Wisconsin, I'm sorry, who kind of used the fear of communism to kind of elevate himself. He would call out people for being possible communists. HUAC called Hollywood people up. People were blacklisted if you ever had been to a communist party or something. Lucille Ball was accused of being a communist. And many people lost their ability to write movies and screenplays and had to go undercover and do it anonymously. But McCarthyism becomes a kind of a word that means when you accuse people in a time of crisis in a sense to expand your own power, your own influence, and you sometimes you don't need a lot of evidence if there's this fear climate. So if I call you a communist, I've automatically kind of discredited your ability to come back at me. So McCarthyism is that general idea. The earliest time period and the most recent they ask about. Generally colonialism. You could get something on that representational concept for colonialism and self-government. Sometimes Declaration of Independence, kind of those ideas of colonial taxation, representation. The Stamp Act usually isn't on the exam, but the idea that Great Britain is taxing us, but we don't have a consent to the governed feature. You know, we didn't pick that rooster. We didn't give our consent to make this government egg. Weird stuff, isn't it? The latest I've seen, and to be honest with you, I do tech stuff now. I've been out of the classroom for a couple of years, but 1990s stuff, New World Order, a little bit on 9/11 nowadays. with the expansion of power leading to the Patriot Act, the Freedom Act now. But generally, you generally don't get too much after the 1960s on thematics and DBQs. Sometimes, but I would really know civil rights. I think that's really important that we understand what the federal government did in terms of legislation as a response. Here, I'll give you a big idea. Big idea is change always happens from the bottom. Generally, these reform movements occur when people lobby and come together, whether it's the populists in the 1900s, late 1800s, or African Americans and other like-minded Americans who come together in the civil rights idea. They demand change. They lobby their government. They yell and scream in the sense that fire that they create creates a heat on the government to take action. So you get laws like the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, where the federal government is going to put some muscle behind protecting and defending the rights of African Americans at a federal level. So that's really important. In terms of, Sassy's asking some great questions. Sassy asked about the AFL. I've seen this question. They ask about unions. You know, unions are workers who come together so they can negotiate for their pay with their boss. In a sense, it gives them some power in that relationship. Early on, unions are fiercely opposed not only by big business, but by the federal government in a sense as well. The federal government has more to do with business than it does with the workers. So the first unions that pop up are the AFL and the Knights of Labor. And the question I've always seen is that the Knights of Labor was a very much labor organization. They were ditch diggers. Anybody could join. They had minorities and I believe women in the Knights of Labor, but they don't have tremendous negotiating power. They can't say, you know, what are you going to do if I stop digging the ditch? Well, I'll fire you and get him to dig the ditch. But what Samuel Gompers did, I believe, he represented cigar maker rollers or something. But what he basically did by creating the American Federation of Labor is he said, these are skilled workers. And they're all white men, by the way, which is more popular to be back then. So they created a union that lasted because they had negotiating power. And as we get into the 1900s, we're going to see Teddy Roosevelt fight for unions and their right to collectively bargain, to sit at the table with big business so they have a say in their pay, their working conditions, and their safety rules to protect themselves. So the AFL is still around today, AFL-CIO, because it's skilled workers versus the Knights of Labor, which is unskilled workers. We're not going to do the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 other than to say that it's really going to control, in a sense, the monetary system. Just think money, and generally it's about the money supply and how the federal government is going to have sway over that to control inflation with interest rates. Yeah, this is great, guys. I've seen a lot of questions. Lobby groups are great to know. Lobby groups are groups that come together to create that change at the top from the bottom. So the NAACP, Leeser's asked, that's National Association of National Association of Colored Persons. I'm messing things up, I'm tired. But that's African Americans coming together to say, we're gonna fight this together. Many voices together is louder than many voices separated. So whether it's the NAACP or it's the NRA, the National Rifle Association, these people stick together and they fight for what they want, and they're more powerful that way. So lobby groups and special interests generally have that effect. What I'd love to do right now is I'd love to talk a little bit about different theories of government and how it has affected public policy. So generally, governments are generally what we call laissez-faire orientated, or they're hands down centered. They believe in action and active federal Time warp. So let me do this laissez-faire thing and the government thing, and then there's a great question in here from Rushna about new federalism and old federalism, but let's stick to this idea. So laissez-faire is this idea, government hands off the economy, hands off business, let things occur. So it doesn't work out for Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover doesn't do enough in the eyes of the nation to combat the Great Depression. He did do stuff, tariff reform and taxing stuff and suspending, but it wasn't enough. So when you have an FDR come in and say, I will do it, I will get laws passed, sign laws, I will take an active role in the federal government, that's a different philosophy. He believes in what's called pump spending, that if we create jobs, the economy will get better faster. We infuse spending dollars through taxing the rich people. We can give jobs to the poor people to build things, the alphabet soup, the TVA, the CCC, the WPA, the NRA, all of these programs to have the federal government take an active role in fixing the problem. Those are two different ideas. Ronald Reagan is generally put in the camp of laissez-faire, supply side economics, sometimes called trickle down. Let the people have their money. Let rich people have rich people's money and big business have their own money. And that's good because they'll create jobs. And then those jobs will make the economy stronger. The other example I would use is LBJ. LBJ and the Great Society, big government, government hands down, making sure that we protect African Americans through the Voting Rights Act, creating programs like Medicaid and Medicare to ensure the very poor and the elderly, or the Social Security under FDR. But having two examples, an FDR and LBJ, and having a Hoover and a Reagan will probably be beneficial to you if you get that kind of thematic essay. Yeah, so I talked a little bit, Gabriella talked about Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics again, but the way that I always explain Reaganomics, supply side economics, in a negative way, it's called trickle down economics, but the idea is that the United States is like an ice cream cone. And you have all of these scoops of ice cream. And what Democrats want to do, like FDR, is he wants to help the bottom of the ice cream cone. But what Republicans and Reagan especially believes in is that, look, we tax these people too much. And who pays the most taxes? The rich up here. So if we give tax cuts and we pour that money onto the top of the ice cream, it will flow down through job creation. So when the rich guy up here gets $1 million tax cut, he can open up a new factory. And that factory is going to need workers. And those workers were on the bottom of the ice cream cone, and now they can have a chance at the American dream. As opposed to the New Deal, FDR or LBJ, where they believe that in order to help poor people, you need to get the money to them in order to expand the economy. So if you take something as maybe unpopular as welfare, and other people would say a much better example would be a jobs program. That money hits their pocketbook and then goes right back into the economy. So Democrats generally see it not as an ice cream cone, but as a hot air balloon. And then you need to feed the bottom of the balloon to expand the whole balloon. That's generally the idea. But progressive era is really important. So if I talk a little bit about industrialization, I would wrap that around laissez-faire. So big business is allowed to do whatever they want. There's very little regulation. The food is unsafe sometimes. The factory conditions are terrible. There's not a lot of help for workers because the government's not involved. So the economy expands rapidly. You get new consumer goods and new factories, new products, but the workers in the eyes of some people are suffering. So they begin to plot and plan and come together in the late 1800s. Maybe through unions like the Knights of Labor and the AFL, but also through organizations like the Grange. Farmers did this. The railroad company is a great example of a monopoly because there's only really one stupid railroad company. So that monopoly can take advantage of people who need to use its service. So if you're a farmer in 1870 and you sell wheat, right, what are you going to do when the train comes? My back. You need to get the wheat on the stupid train or you're not going to make any money, stupid head. So when the train comes and says $5,000, what the hell are you going to do? Well, you can't afford the money without, losing a profit. You can't just let it go to rot. So you have to organize. You have to get together with other farmers to create the heat of change that is necessary to get the government to go from a laissez-faire approach to taking an active role to fix the problem. So the Grange, you want me to sing? Home on the Grange, where the farmers get organized all day and they be hating on railroads. Now, I'm not going to sing anymore. But the Grange, if you remember that song and associate it with farmers, they want changes. They want railroads to be regulated, which they're going to get with the Hepburn Act under Teddy Roosevelt. They want banks to be reined in. They want the gold standard to be changed. So they have demands, but they're not going to get those demands settled unless they organize. This is populism, people power, and that rolls into the progressive era when now you have at the federal level a president like Teddy Roosevelt who believes in an active role in fixing problems. And they always start from the bottom. Want that? Yeah. Muckrakers. These are people that see the problems and they want the change, but if they just yell from the corner, change, nothing occurs. So what they do is they spread the message. They write books. They write books like The Jungle about the meatpacking industry, or The Octopus about the railroad companies and the trusts that were being built, that were strangling out competition. That's a magic word on the exam. That big business eventually wants to kill its competition, which is bad for the consumer. You have the history of Standard Oil, but all of these books, Uncle Tom's Cabin, are going to affect enough readers. I used to call it the stink thesis. Stink don't stink unless it's in your backyard. So when these books come out and people read about these problems, they're going to be pissed and they're going to raise hell and they're going to call their politicians and they're going to vote. And that affects change. So the Octopus is going to get us the Meat Inspection Act and the Food and Drug and Safety Act. The Octopus is going to get us the Hepburn Act, which is going to set the maximum charge you can do on the railroad. The history of Standard Oil is going to get the Sherman Antitrust Act going. The Sherman Antitrust Act, I used to have a baseball bat, and the baseball bat said Sherman Antitrust Act. And the idea was that now the government has a tool to make sure that the market has competition. So if a trust company like Standard Oil starts to buy up not just the oil, pumps, but also the transportation systems to get the oil to market and the gas stations and everything in between, that's unfair. And nobody can compete with that. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if they control? Start your own little oil company? So the Sherman Antitrust Act gives the government the ability to take that bat and whack that trust to break it up to create the magic word of competition. And that makes it better for consumers. That's the idea of the progressive era. Teddy Roosevelt has the fair deal. We have the square deal. Teddy Roosevelt has the square deal. I used to say the square deal is the fair deal because Teddy Roosevelt believes in protecting business too, but also protecting workers. So you get the Hepburn Act, collective bargaining, Meat Inspection Act, Food and Drug Act. You start to get work safety laws and union laws, getting rid of child labor, those kinds of great things. So that's a little bit on industrialization and progressive era. We've talked about World War I a little bit. We talked about World War II a little bit. Let me check the Twitters to see where you guys want to go. I got maybe a half hour in me, 20 minutes. I'm going to probably direct you to videos at a certain point, but I think that we're doing pretty good, and we don't want to be up too late. Isn't that right, guys? Domestic and foreign policies of the Clinton and the Bush presidents. That's a great question. What I would say is if you watch the foreign policy dance video, I go over this, but the 1990s is different, right? Because in the 1990s, we don't have the Soviet Union anymore. They fell apart in 1990 after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. So containment is over. The Cold War is over. So what we have to figure out is what's our position in this new world? And what it becomes is we become the good cop under Clinton. It's called the New World Order. We're the nice cop. So now we're going to go to Bosnia to stop civil war, try to feed the hunger people in Somalia. Even the Persian Gulf War #1, when we fight a coalition to free Kuwait from Saddam Hussein. These are nice cop activities, but that changes on 9/11. Because when we're attacked so hard, we're going to stop thinking about helping all these other little countries and really protecting us. So Bush adopts what's called preemptive strike. Never been done before in the United States, that we're going to eliminate threats before they actually become threats to us directly. So he believes, which might be incorrect, Saddam Hussein has mass weapons of destruction. Saddam Hussein protects terrorists. Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. So we're going to launch a war on Saddam Hussein to eliminate that threat before he can threaten us. And of course, that's very controversial, and you can have your own political positions on that. So we're looking at other questions. We did Reagan a little bit. You know, new federalism is generally associated with what's called devolution. You know, federalism for the whole course is that piece of paper changing, right? And every time we rip the paper, the federal government gets a little bit bigger. New federalism is the idea that we need to reverse that trend. So you have really Ronald Reagan being the new federalism president, trying to say that government isn't the solution, it's the problem. We need to limit government. So if regular federalism is the expansion of federal power, new federalism is the limiting of federal power or the expansion of state power, if that makes any sense. What are we doing, guys? I'm looking at some more questions. Jay Martins. What up, Jay? Jay Martins. RT. I don't know why. We did a little bit on the amendments and the important authors of the books already. I skipped a couple of amendments. I skipped 16, which is the income tax amendment. And the way I remember it is the 16th Amendment. I think of Sweet 16, and I think I want money, and then I think of tax, and then I go to income tax. So if that works for you, you can use that. Now, political parties, Loyalists, Democratic, Republicans, the Treaty of Paris, the Spanish-American War. I wouldn't worry too much about the political parties. You know, the Federalists and the anti-Feds become the two parties. The anti-Feds become the Democratic Republicans. They're going to represent really the southern United States and limited government. The Federalists, of course, are going to believe in a stronger central government. But of course, those parties change. The Federalists go away. They become the Whigs, who believe in central government power. Eventually, that kind of becomes the Republican Party. The Democratic Republicans morph into the Democrats. In 1828, they're still the Democrats today. But there's a lot of caveats to that. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. I would say no Feds and anti-Feds, and that should get you through the exam. In terms of the Spanish-American War, just rub your belly and understand the idea is we're hungry, self-interest, and Monroe Doctrine. We want to protect our self-interest, but we also want all that Cuban sugar. You like Hershey bars, don't you? Need cocoa leaves and sugar. So the Spanish-American War, many people see as a war of imperialism. Sometimes I'll see the Teller and the Platt Amendments on there. The Teller Amendment, there was a lot of anti-imperialists, man. Like Mark Twain, he didn't think it was a great idea that we should be invading other countries. In 1898 in Cuba, where Spain was. It took the Teller Amendment to convince him we were on the right side. The Teller Amendment, I always remember, tell her. Tell Cuba we're freeing her. Tell her it's going to be good. Tell her she shall be free. And of course, after the war, we get the Platt Amendment, where Cuba really becomes a puppet of the United States. Guantanamo Bay, we can veto their treaties, we can launch military interventions whenever we can. So that were launchable. So we probably would have all died. I can go for a few more minutes, guys. I'm losing it a little bit, to be honest with you. The 19th Amendment, 1919, women's suffrage. I just remember 1919, and that's when it occurred, right after World War I. If I was going to go over NATO, I would have to go over the Warsaw Pact, too. Think of the Cold War as two gangs. Rather than the United States or the Soviet Union, think of it like the Bloods and the Crips. Like, we're the Crips, we're the boys in blue. We have Western powers on our side, Western Europe. NATO is Great Britain and France and Italy, the United States. Now I believe Turkey, kind of the Western countries. And the Warsaw Pact were the Bloods. Those were the communist countries. So, Poland and East Germany, Czechoslovakia, of course, the Soviet Union. So the Cold War is really a chess game between NATO and the Warsaw Pact, with the Soviet Union moving their pieces and the United States moving our pieces. Hope that helps a little bit. You can watch the video on Iran-Contra. I've never seen a lot on Iran-Contra, other than it was a scandal under Reagan. It has something to do with the after the Iranian hostage crisis, when Reagan was president. He was basically trying to fund a group called the Contras in Latin America that were fighting communists in Nicaragua. Congress wouldn't let Reagan give them guns. So what Reagan did, or some people under Reagan, was they started selling guns to Iran and then using that cash to fund the Contras. And there might have been crack cocaine involved, but we'll leave it there. I'm back. Wow, I don't know why I disappeared. So we're going to answer some questions on Twitter. That's what I'm going to do for about 10 or 15 minutes, guys, and then watch some videos. There's a meditation video on the US History Review site. It actually puts you to sleep, where I talk about US history, and that's a little bit creepy. We're doing good. Here's some more questions. Essay topics. So it's really, really hard to do this about essay topics. 2 reform movements. So I would do the populists or the Grange, wanting change and that leading to the end of child labor. I would use the muckrakers as an example of change. Pick a book. The Jungle is the easiest. Upton Sinclair went undercover. He wrote about the meatpacking plants, how disgusting it was, the feces and the rats and the body parts. And at the end of the day, he wanted change when it came to the workers. He was a socialist. But when people read The Jungle, they demanded change, and we got to the Meat Inspection Act. That's the stupidest, easiest one, or the FDA. But that is showing a reform kind of idea to an effect, an actual law. And then I would use the NAACP, Martin Luther King, the idea of the civil rights, and how people banded together. They do the Selma March, the March on Washington, protesting civil rights, civil disobedience, all of that, leading to actual legislation. So even just understanding the 1965 Voting Rights Act, I mean, how stupid is that? That if you were a state that discriminated against voters, that now the federal government can regulate your elections, watch over your elections. Someone before asked about the failures of Reconstruction. Right? That's a great question. Reconstruction failed because we never actually protected African-American rights, if that was the goal. If the goal was to throw the states back together into a country, we succeeded. But if it was to actually abolish slavery, protect African-American rights, and give them the right to vote, that's the failure. Because in 1877, there was a deal struck between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, who lost an election, that we will take the election, but we'll remove the troops that are protecting all those black people. So, of course, without the troops there, all of those African Americans are under the control of their state governments, and that's when we get Jim Crow. There's a great video I have on Jim Crow, but all of these social, political, moral laws and rules that are going to limit the liberty of African Americans, whether you see that through physical violence, the KKK, or segregation, or different limits on their freedom. That's Jim Crow. The grandfather clause is my favorite. That you couldn't vote if you couldn't pass the literacy test. You could still vote if your grandfather voted. And of course, African Americans, many of them can't pass the literacy test because they never went to school. And of course, their grandfathers never voted because they were slaves. But this was a way to stop them from voting. You had poll taxes where you had to pay money to vote. They couldn't do it. So Jim Crow, I think, in ending Jim Crow with the civil rights movement and civil disobedience and kind of all of that idea is really important to understand. So we're going to look at a couple other notifications here. If I had to go other thematic essays, I would do 4 Supreme Court cases, but at least 2 or 3. Do a strength case like McCulloch versus Maryland, do a limiting case like Plessy versus Ferguson, and do an expansive case like the Dirty Little Old Lady Map versus Ohio case, and you should be good. Definitely 2 presidential administrations. I would do FDR and the New Deal, and then maybe Ronald Reagan and New Federalism and Reaganomics. So I had one that was laissez-faire and one that was hands down. I think that would probably be a really, really important idea. Certainly, anything that has to do with the idea of sectionalism would be really important. A constitution, get your constitution down, man. If you know the Great Compromise and the Bill of Rights, Fed anti-Fed thing, that can be a really powerful essay. So I would say understanding 2 important concepts of the Constitution, having a couple checks and balances and examples. One of the best ones would be, for instance, Woodrow Wilson, right? Woodrow Wilson wants the Treaty of Versailles more than anything. More than anything. He brings the 14 points over to Europe, the points of peace. I used to do Kumbaya, right? The 14 points, my friends, Kumbaya. Woodrow Wilson's ideas for post-World War I peace. But when he gets over there, they're still kicking in Germany's ass. That's why we get the Treaty of Versailles. And the only thing that he got in the Treaty of Versailles was the League of Nations. But the president only signs the treaty. You need the Senate to approve it. And that check and balance is going to destroy the League of Nations, create American isolationism before World War II, and direct our foreign policy. That's a great check and balance. We're just taking impeachments, right? Clinton was impeached for lying about sex. Johnson was impeached, Andrew Johnson, for violating a congressional law. But either way, the check and balance is the House impeaches you, but the Senate holds the trial. That's a check and balance. Or the president vetoing a bill. That's a check and balance. So having a couple checks and balances. So we're running out of time. We're going to look for a couple more questions. The whole robber barons and captains of industry is just, they always do the good and the bad. So when you're thinking about industrialization in this period of laissez-faire where workers are underpaid, there's child labor, they're eating, rats in the streets, and there's people that are making mad momo. The concept is they're robber barons because they're stealing from the poor people. They're using their labor to get super rich, and they're not paying them anything. They're not protecting them. There's no health insurance. There's no nothing. So that's the robber baron, and they're killing competition. They're jacking up their prices after they're buying out their competition. The captains of industry is the good stuff, that they're creating jobs and technology. They're building things. They're making it easier for people to live. So that's the whole captains of industry and robber barons thing. Good for everybody. I don't think I can go on anymore because I'm not even kidding. It was a real car accident. That lady hit me real hard, man. Little old lady nailed me. But not in the conjugal sense, because that's creepy. So what I'm going to say to you, and I'm going to show you one more time the screen share, is that you need to go to the review page, guys. Go to the stupid review page. And I'm doing that right now. So watch what I do. I'm going to HipHughes, right here. HipHughes.com will take you here. Of course, we have the video right here. I'm sorry, click that, and you will see all of the videos load. So we have colonial concepts. Watch a couple videos if you have time. The Road to Revolution would be your revolutionary concepts. Articles of Confederation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. These thumbnails are all loading right now. I already loaded it. I don't know. I tweeted that link out a little while ago. So this takes you through the whole course with links to videos and Regents questions. In fact, I'm gonna just click tweet right now. Here, run, help yourself. Thank you. And I'll put that right there. So you guys can go jump on that if you want to. Actually, here is the link for the review page if you're that lazy. The review page is taking a little while to load here. I don't know. There it is. So we'll take that here. Save yourself and follow me for bad karma. Put that link in there for you guys. And I'm just going to go to the end of the, all of these videos because you can see it takes you through pretty much the whole course. We skipped a lot tonight as I look at this. We hit a lot tonight as I look at this. But certainly Seneca Falls, women's rights, that's great. All of these are really great, I think. But certainly foreign policy, 20th century programs. I talked about the importance of having a couple of these programs. Getting a couple Cold War events under your belt is a great idea. There's your Red Scare videos, your economic videos. I have court cases, 9 of them up. These are your 3 strength cases, 1, 2, 3. We have a couple limiting cases, and then we have 3 expansive cases in here as well. Some more recent videos that you might want to jump on, but then I even have a guessing for dummies. There's your DBQ video, and then you can fall asleep to the meditation video. So I think I'm done, guys. That's going cray-cray. I thank you for watching very much. I hope that you guys get some sleep tonight. Don't get 3 or 4 hours. Eat some food, man. Get some sleep. Your brain works better. Remember, you finish those 2 essays or you're going to live in a van down by the river. I don't care how you do it, but don't be a quitter. Hashtag quitters lose. Make sure you do those dots or you die trying. All right, you got, if it says why did the monkey climb up the tree, you make beat up trying to explain why the monkey climb up the tree. For your DBQ, OI or die. If you don't have jelly, outside information, you're not going to get a 3. You could steal it from the multiple choice, you know, I'm just saying. If you find one kind of related, throw it in there and try your best to write 4 paragraphs and use hopefully as many documents as possible. So that's it, guys. I'm going to wish you well. I always say it, where attention goes, energy flows. Subscribe to HipHughes on YouTube. I'll tweet that link out, and certainly follow us on Twitter. So there you go, guys. You're going to do great because you're all great. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the internets.